every Wednesday, 2 p.m. on Instagram Live, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live. Today, we are continuing on with our series called The Truth About Trauma. And today is part 4, where we're talking all about yoga. So if you remember from last week, we talked about IFS, or internal family system. So this is what would be considered a top-down approach to therapy. So anything that kind of falls in talk therapy would fall into that category. We're going to change gears today and switch over to bottom up, which is working on kind of connecting with your own physical sensations as a way of kind of increasing that mind-body connection. So instead of talking through trauma, just getting more grounded in our own physical sensations and using that as a way to help heal from previous experiences. So how does this work, or why is this important? How can just being more in tune with your body actually help you heal from having experienced trauma in the past? So there's a condition called alexithymia, which is not being able to identify what is going on in oneself. So very difficult to perceive sensations, because at the end of the day, the body kind of disassociates from what's going on physically as a defense mechanism, right? We talked about that in the very first week, that idea of completely withdrawing and shutting down as a survival mechanism. So when that happens, the traumatized brain is actually incapable or ignores the sensations of the body. And so what we're trying to do through yoga or any other kind of physical movement or physical therapy is helping reconnect the mind with the body to help kind of strengthen that mind-body connection. And so there's a couple different ways of doing it, but yoga is a really, really great opportunity. And there's 3 parts, obviously, that make yoga really beneficial. So mindfulness being one of them, just kind of focusing your attention on the breath, on the present sensations, trying not to be distracted by everything else going on around you. Having the focus of your task being physical movement is beneficial. Stretching, again, right? Because then you feel specific sensations in your body, and so you're able to tune in on those areas that are experiencing the stretch. So, for example, if we're doing a downward dog, so if you've never done yoga before, you kind of have your hands and your feet on the floor and kind of raise your hips up to the sky, and so it stretches everything on the backside of your legs, your hamstrings, your calves, your glutes, your hips. All of that gets stretched. And so for somebody that's having a hard time feeling sensation, or the other thing, and remember we talked about this in week 2, was that idea of being unable to associate the past from the present. So anytime that there's a trigger that triggers the traumatized individual to remember that previous traumatic experience, it feels like it's happening in the present versus something that's happening in the past. And the sensation just kind of has this ongoing feel to it. It doesn't feel like it's ever going to end. Well, a beautiful thing about this physical sensation of stretching is that it's going to end, right? As soon as you stop stretching. For a lot of people, especially individuals like myself that aren't very flexible, we get into a yoga pose, and the first thing we say is, whoa, that's tight. I really feel that. There's a big pull, in the example of the downward dog, through my legs, through my calves. I feel that. And so the idea is that this is transitory, though. As soon as you stop the stretch, as soon as you go back to your sitting position, then it goes away. And so it kind of encourages the brain to kind of appreciate the transitoriness of extension, the transitoriness of experience. So it comes and it goes. And so it allows you kind of approach the situation with curiosity instead of fear of this is never going to go away or this is never going to change. You have control over how much physical sensation you're experiencing. And then, like I said, through mindfulness practice, you can focus on that area, which is so powerful. And finally, the last one is breathing. There's been a number of studies at this point that show the amazing and valuable benefit of breathing. And a lot of it has to do with what we're calling HRV now, so heart rate variability. Again, we talked that very first week about the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic, your fight and flight, and kind of your rest and digest and calming sensations. And so with each and every single breath that you take, an in-breath activates the sympathetic nervous system, and then the out-breath activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So you kind of have this up and down with each individual breath. And so the idea with heart rate variability is that if you're having a good balance of the 2 sides of the nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, then you're going to get a lot of variability between the heart rates, because the heart rates are going to increase with sympathetic stimulation and they're going to decrease with parasympathetic. And so between each breath, you see this constant fluctuation of heart rate. If it's just steady across the board and it's not changing that much, then generally that means that you're getting an over input of the sympathetic response. And so that kind of leads to this leveling out of this flatlining. And so a lot of us kind of have an idea of what that feels like, right? Something really stressful happens at work. There's a project that you submitted and then your boss comes back and says it wasn't done very well, or you get your kid to school and then you're supposed to have food for the bake sale that day and you didn't bring anything. All of a sudden that deep panic comes into, right? And all of a sudden your heart's beating and your heart races. HRV is in the tank at that point. And so that, unfortunately, is what individuals that have experienced a traumatic event, potentially that's what their heart rate variability is like constantly, but especially when they've been triggered by an experience that makes them flashback or remember that traumatic experience. And so breathing is our best way to actually kind of connect and break this cycle. Because like we said, with every out breath, you can stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. So what do you do if you're overly stimulated in the sympathetic area? Well, you try and encourage as much parasympathetic activation as you can. And the best way to do that is just through long, deep exhales. So a lot of times when you're seeing yoga practices, they're talking kind of like a 4 count in and an 8 count out. Or another really common one is box breathing. So you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, and relax for 4. So you're really slowing down your heart rate and focusing on that external breath. It's been shown in a lot of research at this point just to help improve anger, depression, anxiety, and a number of others. So those 3 things you're all getting from yoga. You're getting that breathing practice. You're getting that physical sensation, stretching. You're able to kind of modulate that on and off. The more deeply you go into the stretch, the more intense it is. And the same on the other end of the spectrum, obviously, the less intense the stretch, the less intense the sensation. And through all that, you're being mindful. You're focusing on what you're experiencing right now and connecting yourself to the present moment versus being in the past or being afraid of what's coming in the future. There's always the opportunity to connect with where you are right now. So for all of those reasons, meditation and mindfulness and yoga all kind of roll together, but we'll call it yoga practice for specifically today because I think that's a lot less intimidating for people than the idea of just sitting and meditating. Although that would definitely be beneficial in this situation as well, the idea of going to yoga, I think, is something that's a little bit more accessible. And the best part is, especially today in 2021, it doesn't necessarily mean grabbing your yoga mat and rolling out to the closest yoga studio. There's a lot of opportunities to do it online, right? We can just pop up YouTube or a different yoga instructor's app or website, and they probably have some YouTube videos or videos that they have posted on the internet that are completely free, so you can get it and check it out right away. So something to consider, I think, very accessible for a lot of people, and something that regardless of whether or not you feel that you've experienced a traumatic event in your life, even if you're just feeling particularly stressed or overwhelmed, yoga, I think, is a great opportunity to get in, decompress, unwind, and kind of help settle yourself down, especially if you're feeling intimidated about just straight meditation or mindfulness, sitting on a pillow or sitting on a chair and then just focusing on your breath. Then combining the stretching as well kind of gives you a little bit of an outlet, right? Versus having your mind running wild and just kind of thinking about all kinds of different stuff. You can now have the focus again of that stretching, of that physical sensation, and that's kind of your grounding piece that you're paying attention to, and then you just layer the breath on top of that. So very beneficial, very helpful. If it's something that you've done in the past and really enjoyed and haven't got back to, or something you never tried before, hopefully today's talk gives you an impression or a motivation to go and try yoga, because I think it's incredibly beneficial for a lot of people. So again, summary between the top up talk therapy, where we're discussing the event and trying to bring a resolution about through discussing, expressing thoughts, feelings, emotions, and how they relate to the past event. Or we have bottom up therapy, where we're connecting and grounding to the mind, to the body in the present moment through breathing, through the physical sensation, stretching, through being mindful and focused, trying to focus our attention on what we're experiencing right here, right now. So yoga, definitely that bottom up approach, and does a lot to benefit that HRV or heart rate variability. So the more we're focusing on that parasympathetic, the more balance we're bringing back to the system instead of being kind of flatlined and just pure sympathetic all the time, encouraging relaxation. And I think for a lot of people, it's powerful to appreciate that that's all inside your circle of control when the world is kind of getting away from you and overwhelming. I'm not saying that all your problems are being solved by doing a yoga class or doing some deep breathing, but it's definitely a powerful, powerful tool for influencing your nervous system and influencing how your body's responding to the present event. Layer in some mindfulness skills on top of that, and all of a sudden you got some really cool tools to help you deal with stressful situations. So that's everything for this week. Thank you guys so much, as always, for checking in. We'll see you guys back here, same time, same place, every Wednesday at 2 o'clock for the next